For several months, Business Weekend has brought you the concerns of small business about a proposed merger between Australia's three big payments players, Eftpos, BPAY and NPP, known for its Pay ID product. This week, competition regulator, the ACCC, said it will allow the merger to proceed, but only with safeguards to ensure that Eftpos remains and that a low-cost payment solution is available to all business. I caught up with ACCC Chairman Rod Sims as that decision was made.
I think they should be, yes. That clearly was the issue, whether Eftpos, as it came together with BPAY and the National Payments System, would lose its identity, the banks wouldn't have an interest in it. So what we've got here is an undertaking that says not only will they promote least cost routing, but they'll invest in the infrastructure so that Eftpos can not only be used in a store, can be used online, in-app payments. So the combination of saying they'll promote it, plus spending on the infrastructure, I think they should be pretty pleased with that.
OK, so the big banks are really the common thread here because they've been the shareholders in most of these organisations, give or take. They seem to have the most to gain from the merger of these three entities. So is this something that actually benefits the banks, and potentially that's the reason why small business is worried?
Small business is worried because the big four banks probably have more interest in the fees they get out of it than anything else. And so those fees, of course, ultimately come from small business, so there is that conflict. But of course the banks did want this merger to proceed because there's tremendous efficiencies. I mean, we acknowledge that. If you've got the three payment systems coming together, you can just do it in a much more organised way. So that's how they benefit. But what they've got to do is make sure that least cost routing continues for small business. OK, so least cost routing allows the merchant to be able to make the payment at the lowest cost to them. So they don't have to go to Visa or MasterCard as a default. That's the key here, but it's Eftpos that is the glue. You've ensured here that Eftpos has to be maintained as an entity so that small business can continue to use it. Eftpos is fundamental, and Australia's lucky to have an Eftpos. I mean, many other countries have just got Visa and MasterCard, and of course you suffer from the fees they charge you. We're lucky to have Eftpos. It is a lower cost way of doing transactions, and so making sure that Eftpos must be offering least cost routing, must be able to be there for online payments, in-app payments. That I think is fundamental for small business, and will keep their costs down. And the costs of those transactions, Ross, when you do so many transactions, it can take a decent chunk of their profit. So it's a really important issue for small business, and I hope this really gives them much lower cost transactions than they otherwise would have had.
OK, so the logic of this merger was about trying to get literally a bigger pool so that there could be significant competition put out towards not just the Visas and the MasterCards, but to new entrants coming out, to the likes of Google and Apple and Microsoft, Amazon are likely to be in this space in the future. Is that again a part of your thinking?
Yes, clearly BPAY, NPP, National Payments Platform and Eftpos can compete at the margins. Maybe they might have competed in future, but we're less concerned about that because they are competing against Visa and MasterCard, and they will want to come together and compete against Google and Apple. And again, Ross, I think the crucial thing is those countries that have more vigorous domestic payment systems do better. If you're in the hands of, be it Visa or MasterCard or Apple or Google, you're going to be paying too much for your payments, and that's a lot of money and can really damage local business. So it's crucial we have a domestic payment system, but it's also crucial that it looks after small business.
Because in the past, you've already had to make decisions on the payments system in regards to Apple Pay and the behaviour of banks and the behaviour of Apple Pay when it came to allowing sort of payments and banks onto that payment platform. So did that give you a sense as to what might come as some of the bigger tech giants move into this space, into the payment system in Australia in the future?
The landscape changes so quickly here, Ross. We looked at this 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. Apple Pay had a certain size. It's probably tripled or quadrupled that size in a couple of years. So it is changing very quickly because of the work we've done in the past on Apple Pay, our digital platforms work. We feel we really understand this. And so we understand just how dynamic it is, and we understand just how important it is to have a local payment system like Eftpos to keep the other players honest and to make sure we get low-cost transaction fees for small business.
Okay, so the enforceable undertaking that you have now made this new merged entity sort of comply with, just explain what that entails.
It does a couple of things. Firstly, it requires the three bodies coming together to make sure that Eftpos, that they promote Eftpos and they promote least cost routing. So that's an overarching obligation which will be apparent to everybody, including the Reserve Bank, including the government, to make sure that they actually do that. Secondly, it requires them to invest in all the infrastructure you need to get Eftpos accepted for online payments, which it's not now, in-app purchases, which it's not now. Most people use their Eftpos card when they're in the store. This will give much more wider usage, and it does take investment to do that. You've got to make sure you've got the anti-fraud mechanisms and all the other mechanisms. So the combination of promoting least cost routing and Eftpos and investing to have the infrastructure there in the first place so that it's all sitting there ready to go, I think is a crucial requirements on the big banks.
Okay, so there's a 4-year review. Does that simply mean in 4 years' time, if everything's going okay, that they can then wipe out Eftpos?
Look, these things are always time limited, Ross, and in a changing world, who knows where we're going to be in 4 years. I think, though, that small business has every right after 4 years to sit there and say, well, what's going to happen now? And make sure that, I mean, obviously they have a certain political power, they have the ability to lobby the Reserve Bank. I think they should be, and I'm sure they will be, using that power in 4 years' time to make sure that something comes along. But the key point, Ross, is the infrastructure is now in place. I mean, why would you dismantle something that's there? So I think even after 4 years, they'll still be in a strong position.
Rod Sims, good to chat to you today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ross.